something else big happened. Russia knew that these attacks were coming, clearly. And today, Russian President Vladimir Putin declared martial law over this area. So over these 4 regions that were recently annexed. Here he is in his own words describing what's still happening and the attacks that are still taking place. So declaring martial law. Watch.
Гибнут мирные люди. Неонацисты используют откровенно террористические методы диверсии на объектах жизнеобеспечения. Устраивают покушения на представителей местных органов власти в Донецкой Народной Республике, Луганской Народной Республике, а также в Херсонской и Запорожской областях до их вступления в состав России действовал режим военного положения. И сейчас нам необходимо оформить этот режим уже в рамках российского законодательства. Поэтому мною подписан указ о введении военного положения в этих 4 субъектах Российской Федерации. В сегодняшней ситуации считаю необходимым наделить дополнительными полномочиями руководителей всех российских регионов. Соответствующий указ также сегодня подписан. Высшие должностные лица субъектов Федерации должны уделять необходимое внимание реализации мер, призванных обеспечить безопасность людей, охрану и антитеррористическую защищенность критически важных объектов, поддержание общественного порядка.
And the maintenance of public order. So, according to sources I've spoken to this afternoon, Ukrainian forces are amassing toward the area of Kherson. Russian authorities have begun relocating residents eastward across the river. And a bunch of big things that will change for people after the introduction of martial law. So what does this mean in the DPR, the LPR, Zaporizhia, and Kherson regions? So here's sort of a breakdown. I'm just going to go through just a couple of points. So first of all, what martial law means for this is security of all military, transport, municipal, and other facilities is strengthened. In general, everything that is important for conducting defensive maneuvers and maintaining life will be guarded. It will no longer be possible to cut past the fence of the only boiler house in town, is what they're basically saying. Number 2, civilians will be relocated to safe neighborhoods. Number 3, entry and movement throughout the territory where martial law is declared is now restricted. All need passes and permits from the military. This is coming from Eva Bartlett this afternoon. Soldiers have the right to inspect any vehicles. All parties and religions whose propaganda undermines the defense of those regions are temporarily banned. The military may enlist civilians to fight fires, dig trenches, or clear rubble after enemy shelling.
Jeez.
Authorities may take from residents of regions where martial law has been declared, they may take their vehicles or their real estate, which they then decide if they need to use for defense. And it says specifically, compensation is mandatory. We must pay you for your house if we take it. We must pay you for your car if we take it, like eminent domain.
Yes.
Basically. Number 7, strikes, rallies, or other mass events are prohibited. A curfew shall be imposed. The military are allowed to check documents, search homes, vehicles. Violators, if caught, will be detained for up to 30 days. Number 9, military censorship is introduced. The Army has the right to read all of your letters, all of your messages on the internet, and to listen to all conversations. This is Russia saying this about these regions now. A separate court order for this is in civilian life. It is not required. As in civilian life is not required. So they don't have to seek court order to listen in on you right now in these 4 regions. All civilians are prohibited from carrying transmitting radios. That does not apply to cell phones. So you can't carry a transmitting radio, which you would think would be way more, the cell phone would be way more damning or problematic than an old transmitting radio.
This was done by the Nazis in World War II, that they outlawed radios.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So there you go. Well, we would like to repeat, all restrictions are only for the territory where a special regime is in force. So those 4 regions. So that's martial law under Vladimir Putin this afternoon. So they say it's for the protection of the people, and something big is absolutely about to happen in this region, and we also got word the massing of forces in Belarus. So
remember, these people voted to become a part of Russia, knowing they would continue to be under attack. And they voted this, they thought they would be getting extra protection. This may be in line with what a lot of them thought would happen and would need to happen in order for the final frontier, the final battle. I don't know that for sure, but we heard so many civilians when they were voting saying, we need the protection, we need this now. So,
as the Ukrainian counteroffensive progresses in Kherson, one of the 4 regions in Ukraine that Moscow recently claimed to have annexed, the new commander of Russia's forces and a string of Moscow-installed local officials urged residents to evacuate.
Under these conditions, the priority is preserving the life and health of peaceful citizens. Therefore, the Russian army will provide the already announced safe transportation of the population under the relocation program being prepared by the Russian government.
According to our information, the Ukrainians, encouraged by the West, will begin their offensive on Kherson city very soon. Shelling cannot be ruled out. So for 2 weeks, we have been insisting that people leave the right bank of Kherson region.
Ukrainian forces have pushed the Russians back by 20 to 30 kilometers in the last few weeks towards the Dnieper River. Russia has told residents to move to its left bank or into Russia itself.
Everyone who wants to move from Kherson will receive a housing certificate, according to which they will be able to choose housing in any region of Russia.
As Ukrainian troops push towards Kherson city, the first major settlement to fall to Russian forces after the Kremlin launched its invasion on February 24th, the Russian military commander accepted that the situation was tense for its troops. Moscow said its forces were keeping up strikes on targets across Ukraine, the biggest wave since the invasion began.
The Kiev regime, as is well known, refused to recognize the will of the people. They deny any attempts at negotiations. They continue with shelling. Civilians are dying. Neo-Nazis use blatant terrorist methods. They're sabotaging the civilian infrastructure. They are making murder attempts at the local administration officials, like their predecessors, Bandera followers and Nazi followers. They tried to create an underground of bandits. They are sending saboteurs to our territory. The Ukrainian special forces were the ones behind the explosion at the Crimea Bridge. We stopped terrorist attacks in other regions of Russia, at the transport logistics infrastructure, energy infrastructure, and also sites of nuclear power infrastructure. I would like to remind you that in the Donetsk People's Republic and Lugansk People's Republic, and also in the Kherson and Zaporozhye regions, before they were acceded to Russia, there was a martial law. And now we need to make it follow the Russian legislation. That's why I signed the decree on introducing martial law in these 4 constituent entities of the Russian Federation. It will be sent to the Federation Council immediately. The State Duma was also informed about this decision. Other than that, I think in this situation we need to give additional authority to the heads of all the Russian regions.
I'd like to ask you about NATO enlargement, and in particular, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky announced a bid for fast-track membership of NATO. He pointed to the examples of Finland and Sweden. Will you agree to fast-track NATO's bid in the next 12 months?
It's nothing new that Ukraine has the ambition of joining NATO. NATO's position remains unchanged. NATO's door is open. We have demonstrated that over the last years with North Macedonia and Montenegro, but also with Finland and Sweden. And of course, we also strongly convey the message that every nation has the right to choose its own path, including, of course, Ukraine. At the end of the day, it will be for the 30 NATO allies and Ukraine to decide on membership. Russia doesn't have any say in that. Our main focus now is on ensuring that Ukraine wins the war, and therefore all our focus is on providing support to Ukraine.
But the question is, do you personally support NATO, Ukraine's application for fast-track membership?
I personally stand by the decisions we have made, which is on saying that NATO's door remains open and that Ukraine one day will be a member of the alliance. But the the short term, the priority now is on providing support to Ukraine to enable them to make more gains on the battlefield, and then to ensure that we can end the war in a way that ensures that Ukraine remains a sovereign, independent nation in Europe. That's a precondition for any discussion about membership.
You have, though, and I'd just like to quote you here, you have supported Finland and Sweden's bid. You came out and you said this would be an historic moment. Why do you dodge clearly answering whether or not you support Ukraine in a fast-track bid?
Because I strongly believe that Ukraine is in a different position than Finland and Sweden are. Finland and Sweden are long-term partners of NATO. We have consensus in the alliance on inviting them to become members. We made that decision at the summit in Madrid in May. What we see in Ukraine is a war going on, and the top priority is therefore to provide military support to Ukraine, as we do as NATO allies and partners. And this military support is unprecedented, and it's really helped the Ukrainians to now make gains on the battlefield. Of course, the victories on the battlefield is something that belongs to the brave Ukrainian soldiers. But without the support from NATO allies, they would have not been able to make these gains and to push the Russian invading forces back, as we've seen over the last weeks.
But if we look back, in 2008, NATO pledged that Ukraine would eventually become an alliance member. Ukraine, of course, has this on paper. Did NATO give false hopes to Ukraine all those years ago?
No, so this is still the ambition of the alliance, but the focus has been since 2008 on reforms, on capacity building, on supporting Ukraine in moving towards NATO membership. As I also know that EU members have been working with Ukraine moving towards EU membership. But of course, since 2014, we have been in a situation where Russia has annexed Crimea and controlled eastern part of Donbas. So the main focus has then been to provide military support to Ukraine, and NATO allies, like especially the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, have trained and equipped the Ukrainian forces not since February, but since 2014, and that has ensured that Ukrainian armed forces are much bigger, much better trained, much better led, much better equipped now than in 2014, and this is making a huge difference on the battlefield as we speak.